It is 5:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. You are in the checkout line at the grocery store. The fluorescent lights are humming, a low-grade headache is setting in, and your 4-year-old has just thrown themselves onto the linoleum because you said no to the candy bar. Everyone is looking. In that singular, heated moment, two distinct voices usually rise up in our minds. One voice, perhaps echoing how we were raised, says, "Pick them up, set a hard boundary, and demand respect immediately." The other voice, born of modern books and blogs, whispers, "Get down on their level, validate the feeling, and co-regulate." Both voices promise a solution. Both voices claim to be the right way. But standing there, amidst the staring strangers, neither feels entirely sufficient. Why does the gap between strict boundaries and gentle guidance feel so wide? And more importantly, are we asking the wrong question by trying to choose just one? The tension we feel in that checkout line isn't just about embarrassment. It is a fundamental philosophical paradox. On one side, we have the biological imperative for order. We need our children to listen to us to keep them safe, to get out the door for school, and to function in a society that has rules. We crave compliance because compliance looks like competence. But on the other side, we have a deep, frantic desire for their long-term autonomy. We want them to obey us now, yet we simultaneously want them to be independent thinkers who can stand up to peer pressure in 10 years. This is the crux of the discipline debate. If we lean too hard into immediate compliance, do we sacrifice their ability to think for themselves? If we lean too far into validating their autonomy, do we raise children who feel unsafe because they lack limits? Today, I want to explore these models not as right or wrong, but as a series of trade-offs. We are going to dissect the three dominant architectures of authority: the strict boundary model, the gentle connection model, and the collaborative structure model. We will look at the philosophy behind them, but more importantly, we'll look at the reality of how they play out in your living room and the hidden costs of each. If you find yourself nodding along, realizing that this nuance is what's been missing from your social media feed, I invite you to join our listener community. It is a space for thoughtful parents who prefer deep dives over quick fixes. But for now, let's turn our attention to the oldest and most ingrained model of them all, the architecture of strict authority. Let's begin with the model most of us recognize from previous generations, the strict boundary approach. Often labeled as traditional or authoritarian, the core philosophy here is actually quite grounded. It posits that the world is a chaotic, dangerous place, and the parent's primary job is to serve as a strong, impenetrable wall against that chaos. The belief is that children feel safest when they know exactly where the line is. In this framework, authority is hierarchical and absolute. The parent leads, the child follows. It is not necessarily about cruelty, it is about efficiency and protection. The logic suggests that if a child learns to respect external authority at home, they will seamlessly respect teachers, laws, and employers later in life. It prioritizes the collective peace of the household over the individual expression of the child in any given moment. It asks the child to subordinate their immediate impulse to the greater good of the family structure. But what does this actually look like on a Sunday morning? In practice, the strict boundary model is clean. It's binary. You tell your child to put on their shoes. If they refuse, there is an immediate consequence. Perhaps a timeout. Perhaps the removal of a privilege. There is no negotiation. There is no 10-minute discussion about feelings. The shoes go on, or the consequence happens. For the parent, this can feel incredibly stabilizing. You aren't exhausted by debate. You aren't navigating a labyrinth of emotions. You are simply enforcing a known law. The house is often quieter. Dinner happens on time. To an outsider looking in, this family looks well-behaved and respectful. The machinery of the home operates with high efficiency because the friction of dissent has been removed from the equation. However, every system has a cost. The trade-off of the strict boundary model is often paid in the currency of internal reasoning. When we prioritize immediate compliance above all else, we accidentally bypass the child's why. A child who obeys because they fear a consequence isn't necessarily learning right from wrong. They are learning risk management. They are learning to scan the room to see if the authority figure is watching. The research suggests that while this produces excellent short-term behavior, it can create a fragility in long-term moral autonomy. When the enforcer is removed, say when they go to college, the external structure collapses and they may struggle to self-regulate. Furthermore, there is an emotional tax. If a child feels their perspective is consistently shut down in favor of "because I said so," they may begin to view the parent not as a confidant, but as a warden. The relationship remains intact, but the intimacy, the knowledge of who that child really is, can erode. Does this mean strict boundaries are obsolete? I don't think so. There are specific contexts where this model shines. In high-stakes safety scenarios, parking lots, swimming pools, busy streets, absolute, unquestioning compliance is a life-saving mechanism. Furthermore, some children with high anxiety actually find great comfort in a rigid, predictable structure where they don't have to make choices. For a child who feels overwhelmed by the world, a parent who takes the reins completely can feel like a relief. The key is recognizing that this approach is a tool for crisis and safety, rather than a default mode for emotional growth. Here is the thought that often keeps me up at night regarding strictness. We often worry about the child who rebels against strict boundaries, but perhaps we should be more worried about the child who doesn't. The child who complies perfectly, who never pushes back, who becomes the pleaser. In a strict system, this child is viewed as a success story, but psychologically, they may be learning to completely disconnect from their own intuition to keep the peace. They become adults who cannot say no, who cannot set boundaries, because they were trained that their own comfort is secondary to authority. That is a heavy price for a quiet dinner table. Now let's swing the pendulum to the other side. The gentle guidance model, often popularized as gentle parenting or respectful parenting. The core philosophy here is a radical shift from behavior management to emotional stewardship. This approach views behavior not as a problem to be fixed, but as communication to be deciphered. The premise is that a child who is acting out is a child who is struggling, dysregulated, hungry, tired, or feeling disconnected. The parent's role is not to be a wall, but a container. You are there to lend them your calm when they have lost theirs. The goal is not compliance. The goal is connection. The belief is that if a child feels heard and understood, they will naturally want to cooperate. It prioritizes the long-term health of the relationship over the immediate convenience of the parent. The reality of this approach, however, is messy. It looks like sitting on the floor for 20 minutes while your child cries about the wrong color cup. It involves a tremendous amount of narration. I see you are sad. You wanted the blue cup. It is hard when we don't get what we want. To an outsider, this can look like indulgence. It can look like the inmates are running the asylum. It requires a parent to have a near superhuman level of patience and emotional bandwidth. You are constantly suppressing your own trigger responses to co-regulate theirs. There are days where this feels beautiful and deeply human, and there are days where you feel held hostage by a 3-year-old's emotions, trapped in an endless loop of validating feelings while the dinner burns on the stove. The trade-off here is distinct and often undiscussed in parenting forums. The primary cost is parental burnout. This model is resource-heavy. It demands that the parent be the emotional shock absorber for every ripple in the child's day. If we aren't careful, we can slip into permissive parenting, where we are so afraid of invalidating a feeling that we fail to set a boundary. We might explain why we are leaving the park for 10 minutes, hoping the child agrees, rather than simply picking them up and leaving. The risk is that the child becomes anxious. Paradoxically, too much negotiation can feel unsafe to a child. If everything is up for discussion, then nothing is solid. A child needs to know that the parent is in charge, capable of steering the ship. If the captain is constantly asking the passenger for permission to turn the wheel, the passenger gets scared. When does this approach shine? It is transformative for building emotional intelligence. It is the gold standard for children who are highly sensitive or who have experienced trauma. It builds a profound sense of trust. The child knows that no matter how ugly their feelings get, they will not be rejected or punished for them. For deep emotional work and for fostering a child who is empathetic and attuned to others, gentle guidance provides the necessary soil. It works best when the parent has a strong support system and the capacity to pour from a full cup. Before we move to the middle ground, I want to introduce a variable that often gets missed in this binary debate. Conventional wisdom says a tantrum is a discipline issue, either a lack of boundaries or a lack of connection. But what if it's neither? What if it's biological? Research into sensory processing suggests that many behaviors we label as defiant are actually physiological stress responses. The child isn't refusing to put on the coat because they disrespect you. They are refusing because the seam hurts their wrist and their nervous system is in fight or flight. If we treat a sensory issue with a discipline strategy, strict or gentle, we miss the mark entirely. We need to keep our curiosity lens wide enough to see the biology underneath the psychology. This brings us to the third perspective, often called authoritative, or what I like to call collaborative structure. This is the synthesis. The philosophy here is that a child needs both high warmth and high standards. Think of it like a guardrail on a mountain road. The guardrail is hard, it doesn't move. That's the boundary. But the space inside the road is wide, allowing the car to move freely. The parent provides the structure, but within that structure, the child has autonomy. The core belief is that children learn best when they are involved in the problem-solving process. It's not, do this because I said so, nor is it, what do you feel like doing? It is, here is the problem we need to solve together. How can we meet my need for safety and your need for fun? In reality, this looks like a lot of front-loading. It's Tuesday night. Instead of demanding the room be cleaned, or cleaning it yourself while resenting it, you sit down at a neutral time. You say, I noticed getting ready in the morning is stressful because we can't find clothes. What is your plan for keeping the floor clear? It invites the child to be an architect of their own rules. It looks like offering limited choices. You can brush your teeth now or after the story. Which do you choose? The boundary, brushing teeth, is non-negotiable. But the autonomy, the timing, is respected. It feels less like a battle of wills and more like a mentorship. You are the senior partner. They are the junior partner. The trade-off, time and mental load. Collaborative structure is intellectually demanding. It takes far longer to problem solve with a 6-year-old than to issue a command. It requires you to be creative, to think on your feet, and to remember to offer choices before the situation escalates. It also requires a child who is developmentally ready to engage in that logic. You cannot collaborate on safety with a toddler running toward the street. And sometimes you do all the right collaborative things and the child still refuses. In those moments, you still have to enforce the boundary, which can feel like a failure of the collaboration, even though it isn't. This model is the best fit for the widest range of neurotypical scenarios, particularly as children age out of the toddler years and into school age. It is excellent for building executive function skills. By asking, "What is your plan?" you are training their prefrontal cortex to visualize steps and consequences. It respects the child's growing need for power while keeping the parent firmly in the lead. It creates a home dynamic that feels fair. The child may not like the rule, but they usually understand the logic behind it because they were part of the conversation. As we weigh these three models, strict, gentle, collaborative, we must layer on the biological reality. No discipline model works if the child's brain is offline. When a child is in a state of high stress, screaming, kicking, shutting down, their amygdala has hijacked their system. They literally cannot access the part of the brain that processes logic, consequences, or I statements. In that moment, a strict lecture is just noise, and a collaborative question is overwhelming. The only thing that penetrates is safety. This is where we have to be agile. We might need the gentle approach to soothe the nervous system first, before we can use the collaborative approach to solve the problem, or the strict boundary to prevent injury. This brings us to the concept of goodness of fit. We often talk about these models as if they are software we install, and the child is the hardware. But the hardware varies wildly. You might have one child who is naturally compliant and sensitive. For them, a stern look is a heavy punishment, and a strict model would crush their spirit. You might have another child who is high energy and seeks intensity. For them, gentle validation feels like a game they can exploit, and they actually crave firmer, clearer walls to push against. The best model is the one that fits the unique temperament of the child in front of you. It is not a betrayal of your values to parent your two children differently. It is an acknowledgement of their individuality. I've often wondered why we feel the need to pick a camp. We put #gentle parenting or #old school in our bios as if it's a political affiliation. But effective parenting is not static. It is dynamic. It is a dial, not a switch. There are mornings where I am 90% strict boundary because we are late for a flight. There are evenings where I am 100% gentle guidance because my child is sick and weepy. And there are weekends where we are fully collaborative. The skill isn't in adhering to a dogma. The skill is in reading the room. It's knowing which tool to pull from the belt. When we get stuck in the weeds of behavior, the tantrum, the back talk, the messy room, we are looking at the now. But discipline comes from the root word disciple, to teach. What are we teaching for the future? If we use fear, we teach concealment. If we use no boundaries, we teach entitlement. If we use collaboration, we teach negotiation. We have to ask ourselves, what kind of adult am I trying to raise? A soldier who follows orders? A negotiator who seeks consensus? An emotionally intelligent partner? The way we handle the crisis in the grocery store today is laying the brickwork for how they will handle a crisis with their spouse 20 years from now. So, how do we actually do this? How do we blend these conflicting ideas into a single framework you can use when you're exhausted and the toddler is painting the wall with yogurt? In a moment, I want to offer a synthesis, a way to visualize your role not as a boss or a friend, but as a pilot. But first, we need to address the elephant in the room, the fear that if we change our approach now, we've already ruined them with our past mistakes. Let's settle on a unifying framework, the pilot. Think of your family as a plane. You, the parent, are the pilot. You are not the passenger. That's the permissive, gentle extreme where the child dictates the flight path. You are also not a hijacker. That's the authoritarian extreme, ruling by force. You are the pilot. You are calm. You are in charge. You decide the destination, the boundaries. But you are deeply attentive to the comfort of your passengers. If there is turbulence, you get on the intercom and reassure them. Connection. You don't let the passengers fly the plane, but you do make sure they have what they need to endure the journey. This pilot mindset allows you to be both strong and kind. It allows for the authority of the strict model and the empathy of the gentle model to exist in the same person. And for that fear that you've already messed it up, the data gives us a beautiful reprieve. It's called Rupture and Repair. No parent gets this right 100% of the time. We all snap. We all yell. We all get too permissive out of exhaustion. The magic isn't in perfection. It's in the repair. When you lose your cool and revert to a model you don't like, going back to your child and saying, "I was frustrated and I yelled. I'm sorry. I'm going to try better next time," is actually more powerful than never yelling at all. It models humility. It models growth. It teaches them that relationships are resilient enough to withstand conflict. That is a lesson no perfect parent could ever teach. So as you move through your week, I invite you to observe your own default settings. When the pressure rises, do you tend to armor up and become the general? Do you tend to collapse and become the pleaser? There is no shame in either. They are just data points. The goal is simply to widen your range. To be able to say, "Right now, my child needs a wall," or "Right now, my child needs a bridge." You are the expert on your own family. These models are just maps. You are the one walking the territory. I'm curious to know which of these three trade-offs resonated most with your current season of parenting. Are you in a season of needing more structure or a season of needing more connection? If you're willing to share, leave a thought in the community comments. I often find that seeing other parents navigate the same pivot points makes the journey feel a little less solitary. Until next time, remember, you are not managing behavior. You are raising a human. And that is the most complex, beautiful work there is.